Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I say good afternoon. It's the 1st of March. We're in the UK. It's as good as it gets. Anyway, let's do another video. Today, I have a couple of things to talk about. One is a dilemma. Another dilemma. What should I do? I'll explain in a second. And by the way, thank you for all those people who've got back to me and asked questions, and I hope I've answered many of your questions and queries as best I can. Some of the videos I've done have been as a result of people asking questions, and this one kind of follows on from that as well, because one of the recurring themes, the questions that I get are how good is the Z5? How good is the Z range of cameras? Well, I've only got the Z5 at the moment, so that's all I can comment on. How does it compare to a DSLR? What's the 58 1.4 lens like? What's the 40 or the 28 Z lenses like? Loads of questions like that. And sometimes I've tried to answer them individually. This video, I'm going to try and wrap it all up and include my dilemma as well. And let me start with that, because I guess most of this video kind of centres around that. The question is, so I've got a D780, which I've now had for about 14 months, and I reckon probably shot about 40 weddings on that. And I've got a Z5. They're my two cameras for weddings, and the Z5 I've had for about 10 months. If you know my story, I changed from Nikon to Sony, with Sony for 2 years, A7 III. Loved mirrorless, but I didn't like Sony. Went back to Nikon, to the D780, because I kind of missed a DSLR. But I couldn't shoot weddings with just one camera, so I got the Z5 as my second stroke backup camera. It certainly started out as a backup camera. But through last year, it became more and more the camera for the kind of padding shots, for the non-absolutely critical essential shots. So I wouldn't have used the Z5 for portrait shots, for bride walking down the aisle, confetti, that kind of thing. I did all the critical shots with the D780. That's been changing. And the reason it's been changing is I've now got the 40 f2 Z lens and the 28 f2.8 Z lens, and I have to be honest and say that I am extremely pleased with the images that I get from those two lenses on the Z5. And let me read you some statistics, and then we'll get on to my dilemma. Some statistics. I've done 4 weddings this year, so in January and February. I think it was 1 in January and 3 in February. We're now on, as I say, on the 1st of March. So the first wedding, it was a full day wedding, almost. It didn't include prep, so I didn't select quite as many shots as I would do normally to send to the couple. I've selected 160 shots to send to the couple, so they've all been individually edited and tweaked and uploaded to a gallery and that kind of thing. So 160 shots. With the 780, I shot 108 of those, and with the Z5, 52. My lens choice, the most common lens I used was a 24-70. Now this was the first lens back after what, nearly a 3 months, 2.5 months break from doing serious weddings. There were 2 or 3 over winter which were just short 2-hour jobs. So, but my first proper wedding of this year. So I played it safe, and 24-70 got a fair amount of use, 82 shots. Next most used lens was the 58 1.4. Followed by the 40mm on the Z5. So that was the first wedding. Got back in the swing of it. I did a bridal shoot as well at some point. So felt I was back up to speed, if you like. So for my second wedding, on that I edited and gave the bride and groom 171 shots, of which 76 were with the 780 and 95 with the Z5. So more with the mirrorless camera, with the Z5. And the most popular lens then was the 28, which actually didn't change my style too much, because when I was using 24 to 70, most of the shots with that zoom lens on, if I went back and checked, were at the short end, at the 24 end. So using the 28 simply replaced the 24 to 70 lens in most cases. Next most popular was the 58 f1.4, followed by the 40 on the Z camera, on the Z5. So that's that profile. So I was moving more across quite quickly towards the mirrorless camera. My last wedding, which was 2 days ago, 227 edited photos given to the bride and groom. This was a 9.5 hour wedding, so it was a really long wedding, hence I was able to get more shots that I felt were of a quality and level to give to the bride and groom. Of these, with the 780, 53 shots. With the Z5, 174. Obviously, moving quickly across to the Z5. Most popular lens was the 40mm with 79 shots, followed by the 28mm with 69 shots. So obviously all those done on the Z5. Then the next lens was the 58 with 43, and the 85 came into play quite a bit, simply because of the type of wedding it was and the sort of shots that I got. So things are quickly moving across towards the Z5, and my dilemma now is, do I stick with the 780 or do I change that for a Z6ii? Let me run through my list of reasons why I would keep this, and then the list of reasons why I would not keep it. It's Nikon's latest. Is it the latest? I think the D6 might have come out a little bit later than this, but basically Nikon's last DSLR came out after the 850. As I say, the D6 might have come out a little bit later. The one and only hybrid camera, so a DSLR, and with the press of a button it becomes a Z6, but obviously not with the optical viewfinder, with the live view on the back. Basically 2 cameras in one. A fantastic camera. It's my most loved DSLR. I absolutely love it. I enjoy using it, but it has some shortcomings. First of all, the optical viewfinder. I love using it, but I've now used an EVF on the Sony for 2 years and now on the Z5 for nearly a year. And you kind of get used to it, and you really do start to appreciate the advantages in terms of exposure, of being able to focus over the entire screen, white balance, all that kind of stuff is available just straight through the viewfinder. And in many cases that really is an advantage, and I could see that on the Z5, but obviously looking through the optical viewfinder, you haven't got a clue until you look at the back of the screen, and then you've got to start fiddling with white balance and taking test shots, and it all becomes a bit of a trial. Much easier on a mirrorless camera. Also, a mirrorless camera is much more adaptable, programmable. You can personalise it so much more than a DSLR. But that said, this doesn't need that much personalisation. You can change the autofocus by pressing the button here and twisting the dial at the back. You can change the ISO here from auto to manual. You can change the ISO with this dial here. You've got buttons all down. It's dedicated to taking photographs. The Z cameras are more flexible because they have more movie abilities, and therefore are more flexible in the way they're set up to be used. So in some ways I like this, but in other ways I like the way that I can program the Z camera, especially the 3 user settings here. I found those absolutely brilliant. I have 3 different cameras basically, by just a click of a button. In fact 5, because I can also set manual to be another, and aperture priority gives me something else. So I've almost got 5 cameras in one, and I've grown to appreciate the AF on the mirrorless camera as opposed to the somewhat now restricted AF functions, AF capabilities of a DSLR, mainly because of the area, the tiny part of the screen. So you're always having to focus. I still do move the focus point, but so often, probably 40-50% of the time, that still doesn't get me the focus where I want it, because I'm not a kind of guy who just sort of sets my subject in the middle and takes a shot. I like my subject sort of over to the left, to the right, top left hand corner, whatever, to get something more interesting composition wise. And the Z5 is much easier for that. So recently, with some first dances, one of my concerns was the low light AF abilities. Although in everything I learnt last year, I found that the Z5 to be very comparable in low light AF to the D780, in spite of what everyone says on YouTube. They keep knocking the Z cameras for having poor AF, certainly in low light. I haven't found that to be the case, and I shoot some very low light photography, and first dance, people aren't just standing still, they're moving around, and I still get well over 90% of the shots in focus with both cameras. I would like better face and eye AF on the Z5. I do find myself not using the face detector and the eye autofocus that much because it's not that good. That said, even the Sony A7 III, when I had that, I didn't use the face and eye AF all the time, but I did use it a lot more than I do on the Z5. From what I've seen, from the research I've done, from the videos I've seen, the Z6ii is way better, and I will be able to use face detect and IAF a lot more, which in many situations will make my life easier. So price wise, I can get a Z6ii and sell this, and it's going to cost me a few £100s. It's not going to be the end of the world. I will keep, whatever I do, I would keep my my G lenses, because my 58 1.4 G lens is probably my favourite lens of all time ever on any camera. The 85 1.4 G is stunning. The image quality from that is just gorgeous. And of course, if I do switch to the Z6ii, would I need to change lenses? And I think the answer is no, because the Z range of lenses, we've got the 50mm 1.8. Do I really want to go from my beautiful 1.4 lens down to a 1.8 S lens? I don't think I do. They don't make a 1.4, they make the 50 1.2, of course, which is, like all mirrorless camera lenses, tends to be long, heavy. I'm sure it takes wonderful photos, but I'm going to be sticking with my my two favourite G lenses, and I've also got the 35 1.8 G, and even if I want to use the 24-70 lens, I can of course do that on the FTZ adapter. So it really is just literally swapping the camera. What would you do? I think the final point that I've got to that's pushing me towards the Z6ii is these two cameras aren't quite the same to use. I picked this up, the Z5, and I don't know, I now find this easier to use than the D780. I just changed the settings, the dial on the top, to get one of the 3 types of cameras I want for what I'm shooting. I can't recall the last time I went into a menu, or even into the I menu, to change anything, because everything's so set up on the buttons. Whereas I do still need to use the buttons on the D780. So, and of course the D780 being a DSLR, it's different. The buttons are in different places, and I now find myself having to think when I want to change something on this, whereas on the Z5, as I say, I've rarely changed anything anyway, and I just seem to do it more naturally and faster and without so much thought. On this, I now found this is feeling like a second camera. Never thought I'd say that, but I am. So I'll be interested to hear your thoughts, and probably within the next week or two I will be making a decision, and I will come back and tell you what I've done. I'm pretty certain it's going to be change this for a Z6 II. What I will probably do, in fact, is get the Z6 II, and then I'll do a direct comparison between the Z6 II, the Z5, and the D780 to compare all three cameras. And I would suspect that after that sort of test, I'll be saying that the D780 is now defunct, and that would be going. Not much use at this point, but interesting for the future. And if you've got any thoughts, comments or ideas, I'd love to hear them. Thanks very much for watching. Cheers for now.